Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today we've got Tracy of Meraki Kava and Tea and Trace Zen Yoga here to discuss life as a multi-passionate entrepreneur and what it's like to maintain balance despite running multiple businesses. There's so much to unpack and uncover here, and I'm so excited to dive right in. Thank you so much for being with us today, Tracy.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to do this with you.
Yay! And for everybody's context here, like I mentioned, Tracy has these two awesome businesses. She's also a mom. She's a woman of the community. Every time you walk into one of her establishments, even if she's got business going on, she connects with everybody and she sends the love through everybody that she interacts with in the day. And I think that's why it's so exciting to dive into this conversation today about what it means to, like, yes, be this person that does so much for the community, but also what does it mean for you as a multi-passionate entrepreneur? How do you keep it all together and how do you keep it separate? So, all of that being said, I'd love to learn so much more and introduce our audience to your two businesses and learn about the founding stories of each of them. So, I'd love to start with the yoga studio. How'd you get started with that?
Um, I learned Reiki when I was like 11, 12 years old, and it kind of followed me on all of the things that I did until I got older. Um, and I just started doing like I ended up like leaning on that as a business, kind of pushed into it, I guess. It's hard to explain. The universe was like, this is what you're doing. And I leaned on that, started teaching meditation, took my yoga teacher training. We started out just doing like really small events, and then bigger events turned to bigger events. And before you knew it, we were like, okay, it's time to open our own space. Once we did that, there was no turning back. It was a go.
That's so exciting. How long did you have not even just the space, like the yoga space, but all of your yoga practices um, before you started Meraki? Like, how many years was that?
Oh, let's see. I think that started about two. It's funny. We were looking back at pictures and trying to figure out. I think it was like 2000 and um 2017 was when we first had the yoga spaces, and then we opened Meraki 2021.
Wow, that's so exciting. And what really brought you to open up Meraki? Like, what was the founding story of this beautiful kava and tea place?
During the pandemic, I had experienced Kava before the pandemic. So during the pandemic, keeping the studio live, all of us like working together to get everything online, I realized that there was a kind of marry in between this like heightened anxiety and the need for a lot of the breath works and the yoga practices. And then adding Kava to it kind of helped you get out of your way. So we started doing these Kava combined yoga classes, just like little pop-ups here and there. We also did sound baths. So all of these like relaxation techniques, using them during the pandemic became a really big deal. And then during the pandemic, right when the pandemic was gonna like phase itself out, I guess, if you will, those are the words, we decided that the yoga studio that we were in at the time was too small, and we didn't want to come back with the world coming back with people having anxiety of, whether or not people were going to be confident and comfortable being around. And then there were other class sizes before the pandemic where we realized the classes were going to be bigger size. So we decided to look into another space. My husband and I went hiking one day. Believe it or not, this is kind of all happened like boom, boom, boom. I said, within a week, I said, one of my yoga students, I asked if she wanted this space. I know she was looking for a space for her therapy business. She said yes. She didn't want me to stop teaching, so she said we would share. And I was like, no, 100%, I'm being called to just like let this space go and the rest will work itself out. Within a week of that, we were hiking, and as we were coming down this kind of corner section, it was like an open building. We stopped, looked in the window. my husband does all the construction. So I looked at him for the nod of, yes, I can do this for you. And then we made the call and we were in it within that month of the new, and then we opened probably about 3 months later. So yeah.
That's magic. I love magical timing. It's so cool to think that, even if you don't know the details of how something's going to play out, if you really have full faith and belief in what you're doing, you know that all the details will come. So, that being said, how did the Meraki location come to be right next door? And for those of you who like aren't familiar with Phoenix, like literally she has this magical spot that the yoga studio is right next door to Meraki with this cute little, like there's plenty of parking. There's even like little landscaping around. Like it's a precious little spot. Like tell us the story of how the timing of opening the Kava bar next to that one came to be.
I think it was, so we were getting ready to have our grand opening for the studio to open. And that happened to be summer solstice. I'm trying to, in my brain, map it all out. That was summer solstice. We had a really big event, summer solstice, and our neighbors that were in where Meraki is now. I heard that they were leaving. I didn't really know. I tried to peek my head in to kind of look at the space, but then one day they were just like gone, um, almost with no notice, after we had opened. So I think we opened June, end of June, July, August. It was about August, end of August, September, when they were completely gone and out of the building. And I had a previous acquaintance who had a tea shop, and I really was excited, like, oh, the space is open. This would be perfect to add a tea shop to. And they were not interested in opening a second location at the time. And they was like, why don't you just do your kava thing? And I was like, wait, what? Okay, that's a good idea, actually. And then my husband and I, we sat and talked about it. More of him wanting to always have some sort of like lounge, like that has always been something he's wanted to have. So that was the vision for it. We were like, okay, we're gonna open, and we didn't really know like all the ins and outs of what this thing was going to look like, how it was going to live, and what it was going to be. And we just were following, I guess I usually say I just answer the call, just following the, like, okay, this is open. It's an idea. We're either going to take it or we're not. We got the lease and he spent the next 6 months building it out. Um, and we, less than 6 months actually. We did our first little mini grand opening, not for the public, but basically to our yoga community, New Year's Eve. And then we got everything finalized and we're up and running an actual kava bar by February of the next year.
That's so cool. It's so cool to see, like, have an idea in your head and then to be able to, again, just day by day say, how can we make this come together? So, all of that being said, what I think is so interesting about this is you could have very easily just extended your Trace Zen Yoga brand. I mean, it's already doing well. It has an awesome community. Like people know they come visit. You could have easily made it like Trace Zen Kava Bar, but you chose Meraki and it has its own life. So, I'd love to hear the story about, what made you decide to give it its own life instead of make it an extension of what you were already doing?
Well, I truly believe that like yoga is a different animal and it's not for everybody. And I don't want to impress my beliefs and how I go about life onto other people. And kava is the same thing. It is not for everybody, right? And it has its own, while the two go really well together, they both have their own separate lifestyles. Wellness is 100% part of the kava community and the yoga community, but we used to say this a lot about like different relationships in business versus like spirituality versus like church. Um, we want to speak everybody's language. And I feel like Meraki does that. It speaks everybody's language. So if you have a connection and you want to do yoga and you see kava as a wellness experience, then 100% the yoga studio and that kind of realm fits. But if that's not your thing, I never want anybody to feel pressured to have to join into that just to have this experience. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. They can go together, but they absolutely don't have to. You don't have to love both of them for it to be a great time. I love this so much. And what made you choose the name Meraki specifically?
Another thing that I had, and I had no idea I had not done my research on how many businesses actually use this name. There's lots of hair salons, typically female owned businesses use Meraki. Um, there's even a coffee shop in Spain named Meraki, which a friend of mine sent me a picture of. I thought was adorable. Uh, the meaning behind it is what was most important, and it's a Greek term, and Meraki means anything and everything. So all your hard work done with all your heart and soul. And when we first found that term, I think it was like way before the pandemic, we first found that term. I thought of it as kind of a bridge between like cultures. It's like everything you do, everybody can relate to this. This doesn't matter who you are. You can relate to doing something hard and working hard for it and doing it with all your heart and soul and really believing and having passion behind something. And that is really what Meraki is. We put our heart and soul into it. My husband, building it out day in and a night. He like lost a ton of weight as he was building it, just wanting it to be like trying to paint out my vision for it. And it turned out like to be just that. And when we sat down and we thought about like what we were going to name it, that was the first thing both of us remembered was that term.
Mm. He literally, when you literally see yourself being put into the space, like, I feel like that speaks volumes because there's so many different ways that people can develop and create businesses, right? You know, there are people who like to do things super quick with as much money as possible and planning. So they bring in all these people to create this vision that's like a conglomerate within 30 days, blam, let's get it to market. And then there's other people that do it from the ground up, that grassroots, like, this is my passion. I don't have any other external things going on to help make this happen other than the belief in our heart that this is what we should do. And it's really cool to see that because that difference is felt. That's something that like you can't buy, you can't like plan other than with doing something with your whole heart. And seeing that when you walk into this space and feeling that with the way that there's intention with you know, everything that's happening whether it comes to, like whether we're looking at events, the way menus designed, having the attention to detail with your passion being like the glasses that you're looking at that detail with, it makes the biggest difference. That being said, I know sometimes passion can absolutely drive us crazy when it comes to analysis paralysis or like, for example, like when you're coming to design things like what is my logo? What is my brand? What is my vibe? Uh, those kinds of things can be both exciting and difficult to wade through. So, with this much heart and love, Tracy, what is it like to develop brands, two separate brands that are heart-centered but don't, pull all of the life force out of you?
You know, I just let them create themselves. I feel like when you have a creative idea and you want to control too much of it, like, yes, you have to like step in, right? But like you do kind of have to simultaneously step back and look and watch the community grow itself. Watch how like, oh, well, maybe we need to now navigate this way and navigate that way before it becomes a brand. And I don't know, maybe those bigger brands who have a bunch of people with a bunch of experience still kind of go through this, but you don't notice it, right? But when in small businesses, when you're learning and you're growing with it, it might be a little more noticeable. Like all of a sudden, we're changing this or doing this. And, in our first a couple of years at the yoga studio, there were things I had to learn and grow and be open to setting boundaries and not making myself crazy and taking care of myself. And then, not like pushing towards like, okay, this end goal, like I want this way, I want this, like seeing, letting it present itself and then also letting it build itself out.
Let them create themselves. That is like the coolest little tagline I've ever heard. Like little affirmation that all entrepreneurs should like write down right now. Letting them create themselves because you are not your business. Like you created your business, but your business has a life of its own. Like it has the ability when you've like given it life to create, so long as you don't strangle it under the fear monster of control, needing to control every single detail. That's just like, oh, I love that phrase. Let them create themselves. It sounds so beautiful, but I know that like the ability to make that happen means that you have to know how to hire good people and then you got to know how to trust good people and let them do their thing. So, what's your best advice for finding your team to like initially get things built or managed? Like what would you say to someone who's never hired a kava tender before or a supporting manager? What kind of advice would you give them?
My new advice, because had you asked me this question a year ago, I think I did innately know the answer, but wasn't ready to hear it from anybody, let alone myself, would be 100% do you want somebody that has experience, if not in that field, in the actions of that field? Meaning, like, if it's someone who's going to be on their feet all day and they're going to be behind, like, if you've never hired a college tender before, then you definitely want to hire somebody who it has been either in a fast-paced coffee shop or a bartender in the past. I think bartenders from now in hindsight, I think bartenders have a better understanding of what it means to have like a kind of a professional balance between relationship, customer, and their job.
Mm.
Coffee shop, you don't, it's less interactive, but somebody who's going to be behind the bar has to have their own set of boundaries and self-care. And that in hindsight, looking at experience at a whole new way this year. We're really looking at experience and how that helps a business grow, not just in my business, but we have a lot of entrepreneurs that hang out at the Kava bar and, in looking at like, oh, do I have this kind of business? I want to hire a manager. Oh, I just want to hire a manager. Doesn't matter if they've been in this field before. And then watching them kind of learn, it does matter to have somebody who's in a hands-on environment have that kind of like it's almost like a muscle, right? Already built for them. So they can help you and give you feedback, especially if you're new in whatever your new business. It's only been open a year or 2 years. Having someone that can give you the feedback for things that like you don't know everything. Just because you own a business doesn't mean that you have all the answers. And you got to have somebody in there that you can bounce back ideas off of while you're growing.
I feel like you just healed like 17-year-old me because like, I had one of my first jobs, technically my second job was working at Fazoli's and I thought I was gonna hate it because, I don't know, I grew up being one of them stoner kids in high school that like was like, oh, corporate America, punk things, blah, garbage, government, like just a little rebel. And so when I got my first job, like in food service in a corporate environment like Fazoli's, I had no idea I would love it so much. Like I loved it so much. It was like cooler than any video game to me. And that sounds so lame, but whatever. Like it was my passion and I didn't know it. And I had been told or I guess, see, I don't know where I got the idea that this like service industry wasn't like a legitimate career and not just a legitimate career as in like, cool, yeah, it is a good way to make money, but as in like, there is such a high level of expertise needed once you get to a certain point in this industry to be able to like really design business and like help like see growth. And I couldn't even comprehend that before. And
Yeah.
so to hear you say like, no, like legitimately like being behind a bar and like it's not just about, oh, can you serve people and get good tips out of them? Like this life balance concept of do you know how to have as an adult boundaries with other human beings? Like that is a life skill that needs to be on resumes that is so underrated because if you're constantly coming in burnt out because you don't have work-life balance, you might accidentally take it out on your workplace, or you might accidentally take it out on whatever other thing you're doing, thinking that's the thing, when in reality, sometimes it's just you gotta balance. You just gotta figure out what it means to keep your cup full, to be able to do your job and do your personal thing. And that is like, so all the bartenders out there, just round of applause for all of you. For like the ones of you that have figured out how to have a life balance and be able to interact with community in a way that's very safe for them and yourself and very comfortable, but also upholding the boundaries of a business. Like, so thank you
Yeah.
for letting me heal my little 17-year-old me with that.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a skill.
Yes. And that being said, there's a lot of different wild skills you need in a business like this. Not only as an employee, as a kava tender, but Tracy, what's an interesting skill that you didn't know you needed when you started, specifically running a kava bar?
Yeah. You know, I'm gonna just say creativity, like
Ooh.
just constantly being creative. I, although I like have always been that way, I don't think I realized I was. That was like, I'm not creative. Other people around me are creative. Like just because I started a business, I didn't see that as being creative. But like I think having some creativity and like knowing where you're creative and letting other people be creative in their space too, right? I know where I'm good at. I'm not gonna paint the wall. That's not gonna happen. I'm not going to build the bar, right? That's going to be something I do. What am I really good at and what am I really creative at? And like honing in on those skills that makes, because again, the businesses, both businesses are their own entities, right? And I'm learning, especially this last year, people that come in are really helpful. They can also hinder, just depending on like whether or not they know what their actual skills are. But like knowing what your actual skills are, I'm really good at this. This is what I'm really good at. And then honing into that so that you can let other people be really good at the things that they are, if they are ready and willing to be good at.
Ooh, love this. The concept of constantly adding to your skill set, super important, especially when we're dealing with, I love that you specifically, by the way, have a kava and tea establishment because for those of you who are unfamiliar with Meraki, Meraki has a super fun menu. They have all these different teas and not just like different teas, but like different tea, like packages for you. And what I mean by that is, let's say you come in and you're like, hey, I'm feeling super bloated and, just really out of whack right now because I'm a lady and it's my time of month and I need help. I can just go up to the bar and be like, Tracy or anyone behind the bar, help me. I'm feeling this way and I need a drink for this. And they have these really awesome drinks already thought about, like already talked about behind the scenes with the kava tenders so that they understand how they can help people. So all of that being said, there's so many different skill sets that come to the table when you're working at a kava bar. And if you're listening to this episode and you're like, man, I don't know anything about herbalism. If someone asked me that, I wouldn't know how to help. Well, there's a lot of really fun resources out there and ways that you can learn on your own. So, I think sometimes we get this notion that, oh, a job, if I'm going to work at this job, they'll probably teach me everything I need to know in order to be good at it. And while yes, some like jobs are always going to provide some training, there is some personal responsibility that comes with like just being a person and having a job, right? Like we have to go get some skills to be able to come to a business and say, hey, I can provide you with value just like how you can provide me with a paycheck. So, when it comes to all the different skills that are out there, Tracy, I'd love to hear, what's been something fun that you've had to learn about outside of business, that you maybe didn't expect, or maybe you did, but it just was just really interesting to you. Like, what did you have to deep dive and learn more about in order to, continue on with business.
I think it's constant learning. It's constant learning your craft. It's constant learning how you can be innovative. It's constant learning. The herbalism part is very important, and all of our team are pretty educated. It's very important to us that we educate people as they come in because most people don't know. Um, so the more that we learn, the better our customers, we can serve our customers because they know what they want and need. But I believe that it's just constant innovation for me and both my businesses. It's constant, like, how can we do better? How can we educate ourselves? Because maybe we don't know, and it's okay. We don't know, especially when you're just starting out. 100% know. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't open a business because you think you don't know something. Start with what you know and then allow yourself to grow. Because if you don't, then you'll never know what's going to happen. And it's okay to learn along the way. 100% okay to learn along the way. There's some things I could look back and go, gosh, I wish I would have known this or would have saw this but because I got to like learn it hands-on, I'll never forget it. And I'll be able to make that skill not just good for me, but good for someone else that I get to hand it over to. So I think like everything you do and you're constantly learning, you're not just learning for you, you're learning for the people that you interact with, you're learning with the people that like your product, you're also learning from and with the people that don't like your product. So it's constant innovation, I think, is the most important, like, how can I be better? How can I do better? How can I have better? Those are the deep dives for me.
Oh, you just made me kind of make a little realization here where it's like, you know, sometimes when we're trying to start something, imposter syndrome comes up, right? And we think, oh, well, for example, I went to school for math and I didn't take a single graphic design course in my life, but yet I've spent the past decade doing graphic design for very, very many different contexts, really, but it's always been about marketing at the end of the day. And, it's very easy, I feel like, for a lot of people to think that your in the field experience isn't as potent as a certificate, for example, but in reality, it really can be. I think it just comes down to your learning style. And some people are really good at book smarts and like just reading a book and then being good. Um, I feel like I used to be that person, and then something happened in life where like I cannot pick up like I need the audiobook, I need a conversation, I need a book club, like I need to be in community to learn personally. And I don't, and I feel like, and I could be wrong, that maybe it's just because I'm at this point in life where I don't, when it comes to a written word, I don't often trust it because I believe that there's a lot of context that we're missing the moment we type something instead of have a conversation. And, that's kind of going to lead me into this question, a long tangent question on like community here, but it's like for me, I learned through community. Like I need, like even though I'm very introverted, I I ended up in this position of being a podcast host, being a consultant, being a coach, being, someone who helps people because it is the only way that things get movement in my brain. And from my perspective of seeing a whole bunch of different kava bars, I think the coolest thing about kava in general that you can never find at any other establishment is like how community can come together. And by how, I mean, how it's so many complex ways and so many cool ways that community comes together for kava. But in general, even if we're kind of, even if we're just looking at a regular tea shop, community is going to be important regardless, but especially in this space. And if we want to kind of look at the things that community can teach us and do for us as entrepreneurs from that business perspective, I think this is something that like this is a hot topic a lot of people want to talk about and should really spend some time focusing your business awareness on. Like, in what ways do we serve our community versus serving ourselves? And what I mean by this is, sometimes we start this vision like, okay, I started this kava bar, I started this business, this venture because I want to help people out. And then somewhere along the way, sometimes people get, you know, like caught up in the details and then they might forget that community why. or they may feel disconnected from their business to the people who they are serving. Now, this is a normal thing that happens for people who don't have a solid support system outside of the business or don't have kind of like a sounding board, essentially. But all of that being said, Tracy, I'd love to hear from you what it's like to operate a business where your community is really, I mean, they're there and they're talking to you, they tell you feedback, whether it's positive or negative. What's it like to be in, operate in a space where people do give you feedback? And sometimes that feedback genuinely is amazing. And other times you're like, thanks for the feedback. Like, how do you as a businesswoman deal with that community feedback? And how would you recommend other people kind of listen to the feedback of their communities?
Hmm. I'm a data collector. I like to collect data. So I'll explain that a little bit because I do this in a lot of different ways. It's like, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and my 15-year-old daughter will like do this one thing, and then it'll happen like once. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that was nice. And I'll be like, hey, please don't do that, and then she'll give me her feedback on it, whatever she, how she feels about it. And then she'll do it again, and I'll be like, it's probably not a good idea to do that. Here's why. And then she'll give me her feedback on it. And then I listen to what she's saying. So it's not that like every time someone tells you something, should you change something in your business? It's like having an open dialogue to collect the data of like, okay, did 5 people say the same thing? Did 10 people say the same thing? It's like the same thing with like relationships. I feel like the business is a relationship and you have to have a relationship with it. If 10 people are saying that this is a disgusting, like they're having a horrible experience with this drink, then that's probably valid. Whether or not you love the drink or not, it's not about you. That's when it becomes 100% not about you. And I think collecting the data is probably the most important thing that I've ever experienced with anything that I do. How many times, like, if you, Marina, are coming into Meraki, and every time you come into Meraki, it's also collecting data on your customers, right? Every time you come into Meraki, you want to sit at this table, and so and so is sitting there, but they don't mind moving, and they know like that they want you, they want you to sit there. Usually they're going to get up, they'll see you coming and be like, you can have this spot, right? That's collecting data. Like, for them, they know that that's something that you like, and so they're going to offer it to you so that you can be more comfortable in the space. Same thing with your whatever it is that you're selling, the yoga studio. Let's use incense, for example, because I really like this topic in a yoga studio. But like, we use incense. We burn them at least an hour before someone comes into the space, sometimes 30 minutes before someone comes into the space. But we didn't used to do that. We actually used to do it like right when people were walking in the door. Sometimes that can be really aggressive for certain people that have allergies, or they can't handle it, or maybe they don't like the smoke, or for whatever reason. When we first opened, not just me, but we like the smell, right? And we like incense. But then, we had enough data where enough people were coming in, and it was like, okay, incense are not a thing. If we're going to create this space the way that we create it, we're going to tone it down, and we're going to do it 30 minutes before, or, enough time before, so it's not bothering someone, so someone can, be comfortable in the space. Same thing with the kava bar. If, we have a drink, nobody's buying it. Nobody, people buy it and they, they're like, oh, that was okay. And sometimes people won't even tell you they don't like it. You just notice the sales on it, right? We're collecting data on this. Like, okay, we're not going to serve this anymore because it's not a thing. We used to sell a certain type of kava, and 2 of the kavas, I watched the numbers. Those ones are always gone. This one is like, we're not selling it as often. Then we're probably going to do away with that. So then it helps the business grow, and you're constantly collecting data. Does that make sense?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like collecting data. It's never making an upfront decision like this wall has to be yellow. We're going to keep it yellow for the rest of our lives. We're going to paint this wall yellow. And if people complain about it, enough people complain about it, then we probably need to change it.
This data collection approach is so I think refreshing because first off, it does separate you from the business. So you don't have to like put your nervous system through a whole like identity crisis of, do they not like me because of my choices? Like you can keep it separate. And I think that that's really cool to keep in mind because at the end of the day, your business is a fun little sandbox. It's an experimental place where you are meeting your client halfway, like in the middle, and being like, "Hey, buddy, what can I do to help you?" And they're like, "Oh, thanks for asking. Here." And then if you're listening to what I thought was really cool that you mentioned like non-communicative data. So it's not like someone came up to you and said, "Oh, this is gross," but it shows up in the sales. There's so many things that we can look at. Like, is there a table that no one sits at? Like, is there like when a certain kind of playlist comes on the radio, does everybody randomly happen to go outside at the same time? Like, there's so much different data we can collect with our businesses and we can make it fun. It doesn't need to be, we don't need to turn our KPIs, like all of our performance metrics, into the feeling of like, oh man, it's the end of the semester and we're going to have a final exam. Like it doesn't have to feel that way. We can be empowered with our data. I'm curious, like, what's your favorite, like, if you, okay, this is going to be like a nerdy question and it's going to be kind of a weird one to ask, but like, what's your favorite metric to look at in the month? Like, obviously, we like to look at sales in general for different reasons, but like outside of sales, like when it comes to impact goals of like making a difference for people or the intangibles, the things that you can't exactly count as easily, what's your favorite way of like measuring impact for yourself? Like, how do you know at the end of the day, you're like, man, my business did a good job helping the community today? I'm not saying that by looking at sales. I'm saying that because why?
I think it's the artist community that I get really excited about. And one community in particular is the music community, because we are a sober bar. And typically, you will not see certain like genres, music, artists, they're not going to come and have a really good time in a sober place. Um, Open mic nights are usually done in bars. They're not done typically in sober bars. It's because people and their anxiety, like it's easier, karaoke, it's easier to get on the stage when you've had a couple of drinks. And when you can do that in a community where everyone is sober, that is the most exciting thing to me. I always look at my husband like, these people are sober. This is fantastic. This is great. Like people are dancing and having a good time in the middle of the floor, or, people are getting on stage and people are hyping them up and, all of that like true, legit excitement. And I think it kind of draws me back to when I was younger. I don't think I knew how to go out in public without having something to drink, like having alcohol. Because I like at my anxiety, I just couldn't be in public, like big groups of people and like we're dancing or whatever, we were doing. And I had this friend who didn't drink at all, and she drank Red Bull all night. We we drank alcohol while she drank Red Bull, and she probably had more fun than the rest of us watching her. And I will never forget that. Like she was 100% sober in a nightclub where we're just having like a girls' night out and we're all dancing and like, having drinks and shots just so that we can keep up with ourselves. And she literally was the highlight of the night, sober
Aw.
and that is something that I love that we have created in this community, is that people can come in and be 100% sober. And the moment that like new artists come in, they jump on the stage, or, karaoke, someone comes in and they like love to sing their heart out. I've seen that happen. Just like what I could just sit there and watch that happen all night long. It really just makes me feel like we are making a difference.
Aw, that is my favorite example I've ever heard. Because you're right, karaoke is very difficult for people, just as an example, when they're sober, and to be able to see that really, it it shows that so much more is possible. Like it seems so simple upon first look, like, oh, a sober bar doing karaoke. But like at the end of the day, to say, yeah, I don't need anything to have an amazing time other than myself, my community, and a couple of fun plants that aren't alcohol.
Right?
And yeah, it's so cool. All of that being said, I am so sad that we are coming closer to the end of this episode, which means we have a couple very important questions left here. Number one, if you could wave your magic wary fan, if you can wave your magic fairy wand, there we go, dyslexia in my mouth, then what would you do for this industry in general to be able to help more people? Like, let me rephrase this in one other way too. So, for example, we have, we've got some ingredients, we got some good kava, we got some good kratom, we know our drinkies, but when it comes to the actual industry and all of the bits and pieces that it takes to run a kava bar, right? That means there's distributors, there's suppliers, there are potentially, if you work with marketing people who are external to your company, maybe there are outreach programs, whatever it might be. What do you think, knowing that there are a lot of people who listen to this podcast who like love this industry, but they don't know where they want to be yet. They don't know if they want to open their own kava bar, if they want to open their own or start their own like kava soda line, or maybe they're interested in helping with marketing or education. All of that being said, Tracy, what do you think that this industry needs the most help with right now?
I think more community. I
Mm.
think that this industry is really separated and it's I don't think I realized it when I was getting in the business how separated it is. But just what as you were asking that question, I kind of knew where you were going. And there's a brand that is I don't know how long they've been around, this brand. And I don't know if it's okay to say their name right now, so I'm not going to, but there's a brand out there that has a Facebook group and the coffee shops or shops that buy from this brand for this product, everybody is like, you have to become a seller to be in this group, which I think is obviously that's good. But all of the people who buy this product are in this group and they're asking questions together. And other people are like, oh, yeah, we do this and we put it in the fridge, or we do this and we use it this way, or we do it this way, we do it this way. Like people are more supportive in just this little tiny brand that is new to making sure that like here's my oh hey guys, I made this new menu, you guys can copy it and change and add your logo if you want to add your company to it or something. I'm not saying it has to go 100% that direction, but I do look at it and I feel really like, wow, this is really important for us as we are starting out in these businesses, not just to help other brands get bigger, like how are you using that brand in your kava bar, but also to get us all connected and know like, hey, there's often times where I want to reach out to a kava bar and be like, hey, are you guys using this? What is your experience with it? But I know that like that's probably going to go unanswered.
Mm, I love this. Can you actually, you are more than welcome to tell us what the name of this group is in case anyone else wants to use this resource.
Oh, it's actually called Lotus. Actually, I'll have to look it up. It's like Lotus something.
Oh,
Lotus.
that's so cool.
Let me look it up. I'm actually gonna look it up so I can tell you if I can get to it. It's like Lotus something. I'm gonna look it on Pinterest because for some reason I can't get into my um
Yeah, this is a really cool concept because right now, like, that's kind of what my husband and I came into this industry seeing. Like, that's why we became consultants in the first place, right? We saw this gap for community and are like, okay, well, step one, first off, all the people, like, Kava culture always talks about community, 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 which I love. And I think that's great. But the conversations have always been outward towards the customers. And when it comes to like community of kava tenders, for example, like, do you know the moment I actually like made my page the way it is now, a couple kava tenders found my page and, it's not like any of them have like, it's not like I'm trying to sell anything to a kava tender, to be honest, because our goal is to help the entrepreneurs in the space. Like, but as a former kava tender, I'm just like, wee, yay, kava tenders. I love kava tenders. Let's chat about it and like, let's be friends, right? And during this whole process, I had realized that, you know, when it comes to people inside the industry, there's so much that customers don't understand that we have to go through on a daily basis. Like, okay, so one thing that bartenders of alcohol bars have much easier than we do is if they're in a bad mood, no one cares if the bartender's in a bad mood. They can actually get away with it, and maybe they'll even make more tips off of it for some reason because people in that environment enjoy aggression. And and it's fine. But if you come into a kava bar as a kava tender in a bad mood, like everybody's sober. Like we're all aware of how you are feeling. We can feel it much more intimately because like we're there, we're not numbing ourselves. And all of that being said, so where do kava tenders go? Where do the like so kava tenders can talk to each other about, oh my God, this person, I had to deal with this or that to vent, to like be able to, get through their day and move forward. But then the entrepreneurs in the space, they don't have anywhere to go. Like, because Tracy, like you mentioned, good luck trying to talk to a kava. Like when I had a kava bar email address, like at blah, 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 kavabar.com, you know how the only people that would respond to me were distributors. But the moment, now I have my own email address under our consulting firm, everybody wants to talk to us and everybody wants to be on the podcast and everyone wants to do these things. But before that point, it's like, you're right, there was disconnect. And the only way I could find connection was to literally take the gamble of leaving my job and doing this with my husband to like try to solve that problem of that gap. And that being said, there's if anybody is listening to this and really wants to come help with this problem and really be a part, please send me an email, hello@marinamars.com, because I am working on creating kind of a somewhat of a kava bar directory, but not just everybody can be on it. This is like, hey, this is a directory for not only people to come visit your kava bar, but for other kava bars to reach out and just be kava friends, because we all need help sometimes. We all sometimes, a kava tender moves from Florida to Arizona. It happens so often. I can't tell you how many Floridians I interviewed in Arizona. And, to have for just, I just think of that as an exchange, right? Like, hey, this kava bar is sending this kava tender over. Why are we not friends? Like, because we have this very important link together. Tracy, I think it's brilliant that you bring this up. This is a very big pain point in an industry that talks a lot about community, but sure doesn't show it on the entrepreneurial side of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of newer kava bar owners, Lalo actually will send me, I guess he sends them to me because I'm okay with sharing, but he'll send me new kava bars that are opening up, like to ask me questions and help them with whatever is like coming up. Sometimes I don't have a lot of time to ask certain questions, so I will direct them, like to some of the resources that I've had in the past, makes it easier for me. But yeah, it's probably one of the things I would change is like, how do we it's not that I want to know your proprietary information. I just want to have like, have you experienced this? Like having someone to say, have you been through this also? And having just like that open dialogue. And I think, the Kava Den, and the Kava Bar that are in Tucson, her and I kind of have that. Like we'll call each other, and I've been down there and sat at her bar. She's been up here and sat at my bar. And, we kind of have that, but it's very rare to, she doesn't have a problem if I'm like, hey, where do you get this from? Or are you guys using it, this and that? Or where'd you get that fridge from? She has a dishwasher, which I think is so cool, under her bar in the front. I was like, where did you get that? And she like sent me the link to buy it and like where she got it from and everything. That is probably most important for these kava bars that are opening up to have, because it's a new industry and we don't know all the laws and rules when you're first opening. And it kind of feels like, oh, should I be scared of everything or should I be scared of nothing? It's like black, one or the other. There's nothing down the middle that makes you feel safe as you're growing into it. Whereas if it were probably a coffee shop, I would open my coffee shop and put my coffee out there and, not worry about how I'm going about it. By the way, that company is called Lotus Energy. And I just got like established with them and learning a lot about them, but I just love watching the community in the Facebook, like how everybody just will like share their recipes and like how they make froth and how they, where they get their pumps from, if they like this, if they like that. It's, to me, that's like We need a bigger, we need a bigger avenue of that in the kava scene, versus like everybody just trying to smash through the kava scene. And
Yes. Well said. I could not have said it better myself. I think something that people like, I really want to remind everyone out there, kava has been around for thousands of years. Nobody has invented it, nobody discovered it. First off. Number two, when it comes to any of these, like, anytime you hear us talking about like functional mixology or like cool adaptogens, all that means adaptogen, that's just a word that just means like it's a cool plant that helps you feel a different way. It helps you adapt to whatever stressor is happening in your environment, right? So, all of these like concepts of all these cool drinks and recipes that people come up with, like nothing is new here. Like a lot of these herbs, like some of them are even mentioned in the Bible. Like there's nothing's new. Like it's thousands of years old. Like
an
planet Earth
article.
doesn't come out with new stuff.
I'll send it to you. There's an article from the 1800s on kava root. I have downloaded so many things because like eventually I want to put it all in a book or like a magazine or something to educate people. But there's an article from like the 1800s where they were using in the United States using kava medicinally.
See, that's what I'm saying. It's so cool. So when people, I literally had someone try to tell me, how could you be a consultant when this industry is so new? I'm like, excuse me? Did your grandma never drink tea? Like, ever? Coffee is technically in the same category, but we don't think of it as such. So, if there's anybody out there feeling worried about sharing and trying to understand the difference between what is your intellectual property versus what is like awesome to share with people, I will say this, and maybe this is a personal opinion, but this is where I stand on it and how Tyler and I run our business. So when it comes to the actual techniques on like, okay, here's how you safely consume some products according to the FDA and these studies that come out and information that like just needs to be shared that has nothing to do with our invention, right? All of that is the kind of information we are happy to share, right? That is nothing that is that should be gate kept in any special way. To when it comes to education and where should you pay for it versus where is it free? This is where I think it's really important to kind of make a distinction between, okay, if we are here to again, just make sure we're safely serving things and that you're not accidentally ordering from a terrible distributor, like anything like that. Like, I'm going to make sure I share with you exactly what brands. Like, I put out free guides and actually spend hundreds of dollars putting them together every time so that people do get that information for free. Now, the stuff that isn't free is the same kind of stuff you'd see in other people's industries, right? So if you're asking someone to do a service, like if you're asking someone to set something up for you, that's where you want to make sure that, that's different than education, right? Or if you're asking someone for their specific methodology. So if you're like, Tracy, you make the best, like your kratom is the best kratom on planet Earth because there's no sediment and it's the perfect this, that, and the other. Well, yeah, Tracy, she does not need to tell me anything about her exact measurements at all. Like, she doesn't have to tell me her proprietary, special, super amazing recipe. But she can tell me, like, hey, that I know those brands over there are terrible and full of lead. Don't touch those. Like, or, hey, here are some very big no-nos, like there are things that we can share that don't give away your entire business and they won't jeopardize you. And in fact, they'll help you because let's say you have a business down the street that's serving kratom in a way that makes everybody vomit, for example. It's going to be in your best interest to make sure that they actually learn how to make it better, or else they're going to tarnish your brand without even knowing it because people are going to associate kratom now with that experience unless you help bring the industry back up. So you have to understand what intention you're asking people to help you and how much energy that response is going to take. If it's just a quick link or a quick answer, why gatekeep? But if it's something that's long form, that's where you want to be like, okay, well, now we're asking someone for a service.
100%. Yeah. I love that you kind of touched on that also, because I feel like sometimes you when you try something new, you figure it out, and then, people do just assume like even like as employees, like, oh, well, I work there, so I know how I know how to make it, so I can also give that out. And you have to like know the difference between like this is this is my proprietary blend, or this is just how you make kava, right? Is there a difference? 100% there's a difference.
Love that. Tracy, this conversation is so amazing. And I feel like we've hit so many specific, nuanced points here that, honestly, they all deserve their own podcast episodes. So thank you so much for your time today. And I just want to ask one final question here. Is there any last advice that you'd, give anybody? Just in general, anything that comes to your mind right now, whether it's an entrepreneur in the space or someone who just loves kava, is there any last message you want to leave the audience with?
Last message. I feel like if you're an entrepreneur, give yourself a break and be open to messing it up and doing it wrong, and trying again. And there really is no wrong way if you're always learning.
Mm. Thank you so much for spending all of your time and your energy with us today, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And if you are in the Phoenix area at all, you will see Tracy's links for both the Trace Zen Yoga Studio and Meraki Kava and Tea in the description of this video. If you have any questions, comments, anything at all, as always, reach out to me, hello@marinamars.com, and I'll do my best to, pair you up with an answer that gets you on your way. And if anything else comes up in the meantime, just let me know.